Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now.
In its over 50-year history, the Scooby-Doo franchise has gone from being a scary kids cartoon to a dumb kids cartoon to practically an adult cartoon. It's featured dozens of TV series and movies, direct-to-video releases and studio films, comic books, and even video games. Scooby has been everywhere and done everything, and over the course of such massive media exposure, it's only natural that the adversaries the gang face would run the gamut from highly competent to incredibly inept. It's just odd that such a long-lived franchise would see the stupidest bad guy within its very first year of existence. Obligatory spoiler warning, because 50 years isn't long enough for some people. Never Ape and Ape Man is the 7th episode of Scooby-Doo Where Are You?, in which the gang tackles the case of a mysterious creature plaguing a movie production. The antagonist revealed in the episode, Carl the Stuntman, is not only the most incompetent villain in the Scooby-Doo franchise, but possibly in the entire annals of fiction itself. Carl was hired to play the eponymous monster in the Ape-Man Forbidden Mountain, a film Daphne's Uncle Maxwell was directing. As revenge for not being cast as the film's lead actor, Carl decided to wreck the production.
The only ape man on this mountain is my stuntman, Carl.
This wasn't clever foreshadowing. Even the writers knew Carl was a stupid and obvious villain. Right off the bat, his motivation is completely ridiculous. Stuntmen are performers whose entire career is essentially predicated on the ability to not stand out on camera. If playing a monster, they need to convince the audience they're not simply a man in a suit. If playing a random henchman dying in an action scene, their job is to die spectacularly, but never taking any of the attention away from the hero. Even when replacing an actor during dangerous filming moments, they're trained to keep their face from appearing on screen. You signed up as a stuntman, Carl. That's your job. It's also typical for most productions to have the principal cast decided long before the need to even hire stuntmen, since financing is often tied to the actors appearing in the film. Next time, Carl, try asking your godfather for help. From what I've heard, that's the usual method for getting directors to change their minds about casting. Clearly not thinking things through, Carl's brilliant scheme to terrorize the cast and crew involved dressing up as the legendary Ape Man depicted in the film and attacking people. And by Ape Man, I mean a literal gorilla. Seriously, what about this costume makes it an ape man? It's not a man's body with an ape's head, nor an ape's body with a man's head. This is what an Ape Man costume should have looked like. That's just a gorilla suit. Presumably, the Ape Man of Forbidden Mountain was not Carl's first film, so you'd think that as a veteran stuntman with any number of credits under his belt, he would remember that most productions are insured. So even if he was successful in shutting down the movie, everyone involved would likely just shrug their shoulders and collect a payout from the insurance company before moving on to their next project. Speaking of insurance companies, before making $1 million payout, you can be damn sure they would investigate the circumstances for the claim much more thoroughly and with a lot more resources than 4 kids and a talking dog stumbling around looking for clues. It's not likely someone as dumb as Carl would be able to withstand the scrutiny of seasoned fraud investigators. Hell, let's take that a step further. Say Carl was successful in stopping production of the Ape Man of Forbidden Mountain. It still doesn't change the fact that he's just a stuntman, and since this is the 1960s and therefore over 4 decades before Hollywood decides it's okay to cast muscular bald men as a lead in films, Carl will likely never make it as a lead actor. When he eventually gets another movie job and once again gets jealous and resorts to sabotage, it wouldn't take long for people to see the common link between the destruction on the Ape Man of Forbidden Mountain and the current film in which Carl was cast. Also, what would Carl's plan be on this other film? The Ape Man set gave him, the Ape Man to provide a cover story. What would be the odds of Carl getting cast in another role with such a perfect front for his sabotage?
Sabotage.
Speaking of film productions, something always bothered me about this one. In the episode, there are only ever 4 other people seen apart from the gang. Even during the actual filming of a scene, the only ones on the set are the actor, the stuntman, a single PA, and the director. No cameramen, no mic operators, no grips, no lighting, no other assistants, which leads to a very uncomfortable question. Exactly what kind of film were they making? It's not a student film, clearly, because not only do they have access to professional equipment, but they have the budget for multiple sets. The only other kind of production that's usually limited to 2 performers and a director who also seems to be the cameraman is porn. This would explain the somewhat suggestive outfit the actress is wearing, not to mention her name is Candy Mint, which really sounds like an adult film star's stage name. This puts Maxwell's motivation to hire the somewhat naive Scooby Gang as extras under a completely different light. You know what, kids? You may want to sit this mystery out. Just let the production shut down. Okay, for the purposes of this video, we'll continue under the assumption that this is a legitimate film production, and everyone else who would be expected to be seen on such a set were simply omitted for the usual Hanna-Barbera reason. Most Hollywood creature effects and costumes are painstakingly created in order to achieve the most on-screen realism. As the performer hired to wear the 8-man mask and suit, it's likely both were specifically molded to fit Carl's face and body. Actors often sit through an excruciatingly long period of time while plaster casts are made of their heads so that everything fits with pinpoint precision. This not only allows the prosthetics to appear as lifelike as possible on film, it generally makes it impossible or impractical for anyone else to wear the same gear. This means Carl chose to pretend to be a monster using a costume that all the people on the set would know was only wearable by him, because if anyone else wore it, it wouldn't fit properly and thus appear obviously fake. Even if the costume was simply a cheap mask because the porno legitimate film production decided to cut costs and simply snag a suit off the shelf, Carl was still the only one on the set with a body large enough to actually wear it. As his first act of sabotage, Carl tries to murder the lead actress by dumping her off a bridge. You know, even without a villain trying to kill her, that bridge is extremely narrow and doesn't even have handrails, and Candy is performing the scene herself without the aid of a stunt woman. She would be risking her life even without the 8-man. Maybe the real villain on the set is the director himself. Who does Maxwell think he is? John Landis? Carl's attempt at killing Candy is thwarted by Scooby, who not only confronts, but physically assaults the monster. Let that sink in. Carl wasn't able to intimidate Scooby-Doo, one of fiction's most easily frightened characters. And that happens twice in the episode. Later, the Scooby Gang stumbles onto their first clue, a half-eaten hamburger left in the middle of the floor. What's the deal, Carl? On a diet? Not that hungry after getting punched in the stomach by Scooby? Apart from one of my ex-girlfriends, who the hell eats half of anything then leaves it in the middle of the floor, especially when trying to be sneaky? In fact, who the hell eats anything while they're in the middle of a crime? Is Carl diabetic? Was he having a dangerous sugar low? Actually, being in the hypoglycemic coma would explain some of the decisions he's made up to this point. Speaking of mid-high shenanigans, Carl decides to don an extremely realistic Scooby mask, which he just happened to have for some reason, and spend a few moments pranking Scooby. The 8-man isn't the only one with ADHD, as Shaggy and Scooby shoot a few rounds of pool while acting as bait. Just to drive home how pathetic he is as a villain, Carl once again gets injured, this time by Shaggy, who wasn't even really trying. Eventually, Carl is unmasked in what is easily the most humiliating way possible. Shaggy takes a photo of him without his mask. At this point, the gig is up for Carl, and he may as well just flat out murder the gang. But of course, in the end, he's foiled. And he doesn't even get the courtesy of one of Fred's signature elaborate Rube Goldberg traps. Carl gets caught by what is essentially a slip and slide.
It's Carl, the stuntman!
No shit.
It sure was clever of him to lock himself in that trunk yesterday.
Are you sure? Maybe Carl accidentally locked himself up trying to eat that hamburger. The episode ends with a gag featuring a fake-out scare of Shaggy wearing the Scooby mask, which I'm not sure is a big enough payout to hand-wave that mask being a thing in the first place. Although, it's possible it just happened to be another one of the masks lying around the porn set, legitimate film set. Is that a GIMP mask? Carl once again gets injured, this time by Shaggy, who wasn't even trying. People keep walking outside and is smiling. I'm starting to understand Christian Bale. I'm not comparing myself to Christian Bale, but I can see getting off at people on the set. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. There is more Scooby-Doo related content on my channel, and let's face it, if you're here, you're likely a Scooby fan. I also cover other subjects, so please check them out as well.